Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe today. Now, the President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Mohammed Saad Abubakar, has declared that Ramadan starts today. Now, he made the declaration late on Thursday, confirming that the new moon had been sighted. Regarded as a holy month, Ramadan is the period when Muslims observe fasting and prayers. The Sultan also directed Muslims to shun congregational gatherings and maintain physical distancing throughout Ramadan as part of measures to limit the spread of COVID-19. So happy Ramadan, first of all, to our Muslim brothers and sisters all over the country and all over the world. Of course, some key advice has come this year, a unique situation where people cannot gather together for Ramadan as usual and have to observe physical distancing. But yes, as still, happy Ramadan to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Doctor.
Yes, certainly best wishes to our Muslim viewers is in order. But as you said also, these are unusual times. Now, the essence of Ramadan is for persons to engage in acts of self-denial, to purify themselves, to pray and relate with others and seek a proper alignment with God. The 30-day the 30-day fasting period is one of the pillars of the Islamic religion.
Yes.
But the point that I had made previously is a point that I will also repeat, because there are certain religious and cultural practices during the month of Ramadan. People eat together, they have religious gatherings, and in the light of the situation in which the entire world has found itself, many countries of the world, including Saudi Arabia, including the United Arab Emirates, in fact, the whole of the Middle East, have had cause to issue guidelines with the threat of sanctions for persons who breach those guidelines in the context of COVID-19. And those guidelines include, not having any large gathering and praying at home and eating at home, whether it is suhoor or iftar at any particular time. But I had called for, official guidelines from the Nigerian government, either through the government directly or through the presidential task force. But what we have had so far is just, key officials advising Muslims in Nigeria at this time not to violate rules of social distancing. We have had such a statement from President Muhammadu Buhari himself. We have had such a statement from the Senate President, and also more importantly from the Sultan of Sokoto, who is the leader of the Muslim Ummah in Nigeria. And I was saying that, look, this merely advising people is not enough.
Yeah.
People should know that if they violate, those rules and put themselves at risk and put others at risk, there will be sanctions. And that, in my view, does not amount to a violation of religious freedom. Yes, everybody is free to practice religion, but at the same time, we are in extraordinary times. We have a public health crisis, and people, one, must not, on any ground whatsoever, seek to commit suicide or endanger the lives of others. We wish our Muslim viewers a successful holy month.
Absolutely. Another key question that's currently being asked all around the world is with regards to frontline healthcare workers and whether Muslim frontline healthcare workers should be fasting during this period. I've seen it up for debate on several reports at the moment. So there are several conversations going on around the changes to this Ramadan period for Muslims all around the world.
Well, what they did in the UAE is to say that if you have symptoms, one, of COVID-19, either you are asymptomatic or you are symptomatic, then you need not fast.
Yeah.
Two, if you have medical advice, if you are advised medically not to fast, then you can exempt yourself. And then, of course, if you are a frontline health worker and you are offering essential service, your work, the pressure that is on you may make it difficult for you, to fast.
And so other essential workers too, to be honest.
Yes, well, including journalists, perhaps.
But let's move on to give the daily updates, of course, from the NCDC. Now, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control has announced 108 new COVID-19 cases in 7 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Now, the agency broke the news on its Twitter handle late on Thursday. According to the breakdown as follows, 78 were recorded in Lagos State, 14 in the Federal Capital Territory, 5 in Ogun, 4 in Gombe, 3 in Borno, 2 in Akwa Ibom, and 1 each in Kwara and Plateau states, respectively. As of 11:30 p.m. on April 23rd, there were 981 confirmed cases of COVID-19 reported in Nigeria. Now, of this figure, 197 have fortunately recovered, while unfortunately 31 have died. So once again, we're seeing a rise here. 981 confirmed cases. That's just under 1,000. Testing capacity, as we know, is going up. But an interesting point was made yesterday that although we have the capacity to test 1,500 per day in the 13 labs across the country, which I believe should total up to 19,500 tests, we're only having 600 tests going into those labs every day, which is about 7,800 tests being done a day. But once again, like I said yesterday, the number of cases testing positive compared to what we in comparison to what we are testing is actually rather high here, and we should once again be worried. Doctor?
Well, we should be worried, but the Minister of Health gave some indications. One, he said that before now, Nigeria did not have enough reagents. Samples were being sent to South Africa, and that caused the initial delay that we witnessed. But at the moment, we now have our own supply of reagents. And that is why we have seen an improvement in the testing and in terms of capacity. Capacity, he says, is 1,500 per day in 13 laboratories, but we're able, as you pointed out, to do just about 600 per day. But even in terms of that, he provided a caveat. He and Dr. ECOWAS, they both pointed out that it may not be fair to be comparing Nigerian numbers to numbers from other countries. Because, you know, even on this program, we've been talking about testing per population and how other African countries seem to be doing better than Nigeria. He pointed out that, look, it's not a numbers game. It's about each country adopting what strategy is best for it. Now, both Ihekwazu and the minister pointed out that Nigeria cannot do mass testing, even if some countries have embarked on mass testing. In the UK, Health Secretary Matt Hancock has just said that UK is targeting 10,000 tests per day. Now, but what our frontline persons are telling us is that here in Nigeria, what they are doing is what they call smart testing, as opposed to blanket testing. And I guess, in defining their strategy, they are trying to say that what they are doing in Ghana, for example, is blanket testing.
What does that mean?
Now, that means it's the same thing as mass testing. Because the Minister Hanire was saying, even when you do that, you may not get the high yield. But what Nigeria is doing is that Nigeria is focusing on clusters where Nigeria can get high yields. Well, we are not scientists. They are the technical people doing their work. But whatever it is, we still need to do a lot more.
Absolutely.
And the minister himself admitted it, that health workers should be vigilant. And that's where another issue is. But before we come to that, I think it's one of the things we'll be discussing subsequently. If you look at the figures that were announced yesterday, you will notice that Kano has been conspicuously absent for the past two days.
Now.
So that's why the figure in Kano has remained at just 73. And what was pointed out yesterday is that about 17 WHO and NCDC officials have been sent to Kano to assist with contact tracing and testing. But the laboratory in Kano has not been functioning for about 2 days because some of the workers there, some of the health workers there, got infected with the virus. And many of them abandoned the work site. So because of that, we've not been seeing numbers from Kano, and we report of unusual deaths in Kano, which Ehekwazu, the head of the NCDC, says they are still investigating. Is something to be afraid about. It's something to worry about. But the minister calls for greater vigilance on the part of health workers.
Certainly. Kano is somewhere that we do need to look at in a very close view at the moment. Let's go on a very quick commercial break, and when we are back, the morning show continues. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still taking a look at news headlines of today. Now, the Nigerian Minister of Health, Osage Ehanire, has said that 40 health workers have tested positive for the coronavirus. Giving updates as usual on Thursday during the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 briefing, the minister urged frontline health workers to always protect themselves when treating patients. He also said that some others have had to be quarantined in the last 2 weeks due to exposure and are therefore not able to contribute to the health sector efforts. Speaking on the country's testing capacity, the minister said that the high number of new cases could be attributed to improved testing. As of Thursday night, a total of 9,552 COVID-19 tests have been conducted across the country. So this is what you were mentioning, Doctor, when you spoke of health workers briefly before we went on a break. 40 health workers have tested positive. Now, the minister has called on health workers to always protect themselves and has warned against treating patients without PPE. But the other question that we have to ask as well is, can we also ensure now as citizens that our health workers are actually also being protected with adequate enough PPE? That's the other question that I want to be answered on the other side of the spectrum.
Well, you will recall that the Nigeria Labour Congress this week had complained about, the Nigerian Medical Association, rather, had complained that doctors are not being protected and that health workers are at risk. And we hosted on this program Dr. Francis Faduyele, the president of the Nigerian Medical Association. And his main concern, again, was the fact that not enough materials are available for health workers to be protected. And to hear that 40 health workers across the country have been infected with COVID-19 simply underlines the great risk that these frontline health workers are facing. It's not as if many of them have been trained to handle infectious diseases. Exactly. In the entire country, Dr. Faduyele disclosed that we are just 300 critical care medical personnel, and that means that they are overstretched. They are also dealing with something that is mysterious, that they've never had to deal with. So what government should do, apart from telling health workers to be vigilant, what government should do is to find every way to ensure that they have access to personal protective equipment, and to make sure that this is widely distributed across the country. And they can liaise with the Nigerian Medical Association to do this, because as you know, our doctor-to-patient ratio is very low. If you now have a situation whereby health workers are running away from COVID-19 cases, then there is a problem. Then, of course, government needs to do a lot more in terms of training for the health workers. You know, both the health workers that are directly involved in the management of COVID-19 cases and those who may just be within the environment. Because the more doctors we have being quarantined or going to the isolation center, the more risks we face in terms of management of the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria.
Exactly, especially if we go back to the first point that you pointed out, which is the fact that Dr. Faduyele was telling us about the fact that we have hardly any critical care doctors in the country. And if you think about it, critical care doctors are more likely in an infectious disease that we're going through, likely to be on the front line. So what we're seeing here most likely is a situation where a lot of our critical care doctors that we cannot afford to fall sick are possibly the ones that are falling sick, and that's what we need to ensure that we're avoiding. So yes, all protection possible for our frontline health workers.
And then insurance for health workers. Yep. The federal government had said that they already have in place, in collaboration with an insurance company, insurance for health workers. Some states have announced hazard allowances for health workers on the front line. But Dr. Faduyele was on this program, and he said, well, the NMA is not aware that there has been any implementation of any insurance for health workers. Because people who will take risks on behalf of the entire Nigerian community must also realize that there is protection for them physically, in terms of insurance, and in terms of how their work is appreciated. I don't think we appreciate our health workers enough. At all. Not now, because maybe we do not yet realize the importance of the assignment that they face. In the UK, every Thursday at 8 p.m., people come out and applaud them. Yesterday, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and their children also joined. So you see royalty, everybody at every level, letting these health workers know that we depend on you. The same health sector that we have always played Ludo with is the same health sector that can save us in Nigeria right now.
Absolutely, Doctor. I couldn't have said it any better. Now, let's take another news headline. The leaders of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have appointed President Muhammadu Buhari as the champion that will coordinate the COVID-19 response in the sub-region. Now, the sub-regional heads held a virtual summit on Thursday, and the appointment was announced on Twitter by the presidential spokesman, Femi Adesina. The organization held these summits to discuss ongoing efforts at combating COVID-19 by member states. According to updates from the West African Health Organization, as of Tuesday, the confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the region are 5,774, but 1,616 patients have recovered from the disease, with unfortunately 147 deaths in the region. And if I can quote President Muhammadu Buhari, he spoke of ECOWAS, of the people, and the importance right now of dynamic regional policies and integration. And this was a very necessary meeting, and the president was appointed to champion our debt relief, really, from the G20 and from China.
Well, first, let us congratulate President Muhammadu Buhari on this special recognition by his colleagues within the region. The designation of President Buhari as a COVID-19 champion in West Africa is also a recognition of the leadership role that Nigeria plays in the ECOWAS sub-region. And again, at that meeting, which was a teleconference, President Buhari provided the lead in terms of his presentation, in which he called on ECOWAS leaders to work together, both now and even after COVID-19, and how to see how the challenge of COVID-19 can be turned into an opportunity. And he gave a review of the efforts that Nigeria has made so far, either in terms of the economic response or the medical response, or the palliatives that have been provided for the people. And I guess that the participants in that teleconference must have been impressed with Nigeria's position and achievement so far. Although we criticize Nigeria, there have been words of commendation, even from the WHO, about how Nigeria is taking the challenge of COVID-19 seriously. So
every leader backed him.
President Buhari being identified as COVID-19 champion is a deserving recognition for the efforts of the administration so far, in my view. Second, we can liken this to the recognition of President Buhari by the AU a few years back as the anti-corruption champion in Africa. So that means that whatever we're doing in Nigeria, even if we're very critical of ourselves at home, means something to other people. But to now come to the issue of debt relief. Now, debt relief is something that, developing countries have been talking about to the extent that they've taken the most heat from the COVID-19 pandemic. Economies are in a tailspin. Developing countries do not have the necessary infrastructure, and many of them have a huge debt burden. The IMF, a few weeks ago, had to modify the debts being owed by 25 countries, high-impact poor countries. Then, of course, the G20, at its last meeting, also suspended debt payments on worth about $20 billion. And these are basically bilateral debts. And also at that meeting, we were told that the G7, the G20, and the Paris Club will work on an additional 12 billion multilateral debts. But they've been talking about moratorium on debt payments. But we've had Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, calling directly for debt relief. Now, in February, as early as February, the IMF and the World Bank also said debt relief may be necessary for the most impacted countries of the world. So there is a conversation around debt relief going on, because many developing countries may not be able to get easily out of this problem. And many of them have huge sovereign debt. Now, China also has a role to play in this. But China has not talked about debt cancellation. It has not even quite talked about debt relief. And the Paris Club and the G20, they're both very suspicious of China because, China is not part of the Paris Club. And there have been issues about transparency of Chinese debts. And many African countries are indebted to China. It's about the biggest lender to African countries. So with President Buhari and Nigeria leading this conversation, and with the expertise and experience that Nigeria can bring to the table, I think that maybe some progress will be made with regard to what the countries in West Africa and other parts of Africa and other parts of the developing world are asking for.
Certainly, Nigeria's influence in this cannot be overestimated in any way whatsoever. At the end of the day, we play a huge role, and it's understandable as to why President Muhammadu Buhari would be backed by every African leader that was involved in this meeting to champion this particular cause, if I can call it that. But let's take another headline, shall we, Doctor? Now, the Nigerian government has said that it has secured the release of 60 out of 73 Nigerians serving various jail terms in Tanzanian prisons. Now, the Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission disclosed the release in a statement by Abdurrahman Balogun, its head of media and public relations, on Thursday. It said arrangements were being made by the ambassador for the repatriation of released prisoners. NIDCOM also said most of the convicts were arrested for drug-related offences, while a few of the offences bordered on violation of immigration law. The Commission appealed to Nigerians to obey the laws of other countries and be good ambassadors wherever they live. So 60 Nigerians in Tanzanian prisons have been freed, which is good news. We hear that the bulk of these people had been in for drug-related offences or immigration violations. But there are still 13, I believe, that the government is trying, through NIDCOM, trying to get released from Tanzanian prisons. Doctor?
Well, it's very good to see the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria and the Diaspora Commission always standing up and looking out for Nigerians who may be in distress in other parts of the world, whether, they were found guilty or not. I think, this people diplomacy approach is very important. It will reassure not just Nigerians who are in difficult circumstances overseas, but also Nigerians at home, that their country cares for them. Apart from the case of the prisoners in Tanzania, you will note the case of also the Nigerian lady, one Fatima, who is said to have been placed on sale by a Lebanese human trafficker. And the same Nigeria Diaspora Commission stepped in, and now that gentleman, we understand, is already being interrogated for having the temerity to put a human being up for sale. Yeah. So eternal vigilance on the part of the Nigerian authorities. Nigerians are in prison all over the world, but justice should be done, and Nigeria should look out for its citizens in distress in the diaspora.
Absolutely,
and
Doctor.
Also at home, of course.
Absolutely, Doctor. And it's good to see these efforts being made, and it's good to see them coming out in the news. This is what we need to be hearing about. We are about to go on a very quick commercial break, and when we are back, Rota Sodiri, our business correspondent, will be here to give us the latest developments in the business world. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is Rotas Odiri for the latest developments in the business world. Good morning, Rotas, TGIF.
Good morning, TGIF to you too. Good morning, Dr. Abati. The first thing is to talk about jobs. I really think the nation should be obsessed with jobs. I think that's a conversation we should continually having, on every platform possible. Kate Henshaw yesterday sent out a tweet asking SMEs, business owners in Nigeria, she's got like thousands of followers, so she just asked them if they've been able to pay salaries over this period, and then going forward, if they'll be able to continue it. And if you think about economics as a social science that studies the behavior of people and the allocation of scarce resources, this was it acted as a fascinating survey. Yeah. A minority of people, business owners that responded to her, said that, they'll be able to pay 100% of the salaries of their staff, and it will even assist them in stocking up for the difficult times ahead. But a majority of the responses that we got, and we're showing those responses for our viewers now, stated that while most of them were able to pay 100% of salaries in March, they would not be able to do so in the subsequent months ahead. So some said they were able to probably pay 50% of salaries in March. Some said maybe 20% of salaries in March. And so if you take that with the Q1 GDP forecast for 2020. We had Bismarck Werani yesterday on the Global Business Report, where I asked him about, he's CEO of Financial Derivatives and member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Yeah. He talked about how, with regards to the lockdown coming in at the tail end of March, Q1 GDP will probably be positive, but not compared to what we had in Q4 2019. you look at that was 2.5%, it'd probably be like 1%, but then the big drop would start in April. So if you take the responses to Kate Henshaw from business owners saying that, well, March we're able to pay salaries, but from April and going forward, there's a big drop, we won't be able to do so, you can align the economic activity with regards to business owners not being able to pay salaries due to the lockdown with the fall in GDP activity going for Q2. So it's a testament to what is actually going on, and talking about the issues that SMEs are having. Now, of course, we have talked on this show about the central bank's 50 billion naira credit facility, which is supposed to assist SMEs and households that have been affected by COVID-19, to where they have to show proof that they've been affected and they can possibly get funding. So, you know, it's important to note that the federal government, through the central bank and so on, has put in these measures to try to help SMEs. But seeing this in real time, seeing the tweets and everything, and seeing how those came about.
The practicalities of it is quite worrying.
It is.
Yeah.
It is quite worrying. So that's one of the things that we noticed from yesterday.
The fear of a spike in unemployment figures has been one of the major concerns with regard to the crisis that not just Nigeria but other parts of the world face. Take the United Kingdom. Take the U.S. Unemployment has been going up. And even in Nigeria, before COVID-19, our unemployment rate was put at 23%. But, you know, we had a guest on this program who said, perhaps if you add the figures of the underemployed and the unemployable to it, you may be looking at a very big figure. Yes. But the small and medium-scale enterprises are the most affected. And it's good that there is an initiative by the central bank to provide support for them. I saw the publication of guidelines as to how they can access that fund. But we hope, you know, that will be enough, and that will help, and that it will go around, and that it will not be determined by other extraneous factors that will defeat the original principle itself. Even in the United Kingdom, I think only yesterday, there was an announcement by the Chancellor, Sunak, that, you know, small and medium-scale businesses can access up to about 25 million pounds, depending on the scale of their business. Now, in the UK and the US, you can make unemployment claims. Here in Nigeria, you cannot make unemployment claims. So if you don't work, you can lose your job. Right. And many of these businesses, because they are not getting any revenue, because their revenue stream has been disrupted, they are also themselves in very difficult situations.
I can't keep this
and so it's the workers that will bear the brunt. As you have seen in the example of ARIC, which issued a statement yesterday saying that, well, for the month of April, the company will still manage to pay, but people will take 80% pay cut. Now, if 80% of your salary is taken off, you know how much is left. And then from the month of May, ARIC is saying 90% of the workforce will have to go on compulsory leave, and that this will be reviewed on a monthly basis. And you cannot blame ARIC. The aviation industry is shut down. Airlines are not doing business. Money is not coming in. So they have to come up with a business continuity plan. And in the statement that was issued by Ilegbodu, I saw, you know, an attempt to, you know, sympathize with the workers and all that. But we're dealing with reality, harsh reality. And we have ARIC now laying people off and doing 80% cut. More businesses will do the same. Yes. And this is the part of the argument of those who are saying a perpetual lockdown is not sustainable in Africa. And that's why Nigerian Labour Congress is saying, look, you may face the crisis of serious social unrest that may even be worse than the COVID-19. Because once people don't get paid, once they are unable to work, then, you know, and there are no unemployment benefits, no direct checks to the working class, and SMEs in particular, constituting 85% of the Nigerian economy, then we face a very serious challenge. And I think that the policymakers may still need to do a lot of thinking, a lot of creativity, because it's ARIC today. Before next week, it could be another business.
Well, and what was interesting about ARIC, the notice that ARIC put out, is that they said over the last 4 weeks with airlines shut down, the flights shut down, that they are suffering a revenue drop of 98%. That's almost everything.
That's everything.
Yeah. That's everything.
That's
right?
everything.
98% revenue decline. They also talked about depreciation in the naira. It was also in the report that they put out. I remember yesterday when we were talking about the possibility of domestic airlines assisting the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in repatriating Nigerians back here when Geoffrey Oyema was saying that there weren't enough resources. And I was talking about the dollar composition, forex, of maintaining your aircraft overseas, and so on and so forth. So the revenue margins are very thin, and you can imagine the issues that Arik is facing, as Dr. Abati has mentioned. But, I wanted to ask you both, do we have enough of an obsession with job creation and growth in the country?
We honestly don't. And this is what we always, and I think we've spoken about this a lot on the show this week, the idea or the notion of critical thinking and how now is the time for us to apply it. We do not have, it's just not innate in us. It's not. And what is interesting is the Nigerian person is the most perseverant and the most hardworking person on the face of this planet. So it's quite ironic that we also don't have that innate sense of job creation. But what it comes from is a system of disempowerment that starts from the very beginning. You are not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to think for yourself. You're not allowed to think outside of the box. You're not allowed to do anything that the system doesn't want you to. So you grow up to be someone that is book smart but not street smart. And at the end of the day, what we have done is we have bred a generation. In fact, we've bred several generations that have an orientation problem. This is what I was trying to point out in the newspaper review the other day. And that is the bottom line of everything. So that job creation sense that we should have in us is not there. And even if it is there, because we're extremely creative people, the system cannot support us. The system cannot support us, and we're not empowered enough to support ourselves.
It's very simple. I mean, to create jobs, you don't need to think out of the box, because it's not as if it's rocket science. They do it in other countries too. Yeah. First, you need to provide an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. That was one of the points made by the president of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group when we had him on this program. You need to encourage manufacturing. You need to provide infrastructure, power, right? Roads, all of this, ease of doing business contests. Now, we talk about all of these things, but we don't have them on the table. And I guess, being a wake-up call, these are things we will need to deal with, whether we like it or not. Because if small businesses can thrive, if the manufacturing sector is productive, if there is infrastructure, then, of course, people will be able to function. I mean, imagine regular electricity supply alone, what it can do to keep people busy. But
that's what I'm saying. That's the bottom line of it. We don't have that general sense of what it takes to create an environment for job creation. We can't get the very basics right. We just don't. It's not there, and it's such a shame.
And I have this thing for the presidential debates. I was watching Obama and Mitt Romney from 2012. Anyone that wants to go look it up and watch that debate, from the beginning, this is debate 2, from the beginning to the end, Mitt Romney hammered Obama on jobs. All he talked about the entire debate was how many jobs have been lost over the last 4 years in Obama's. This was when Obama was going up for re-election. He just kept talking about, my campaign is about creating jobs. So it would be lovely to see that in an election cycle here, where the candidate is just completely obsessed with job creation with Nigerians.
Donald Trump was.
Well, yeah, so he was, right, exactly, So, but, for us as well.
That was precisely what Roosevelt did in the 1930s to address the challenge of the Depression, what you call the New Deal.
The New Deal, right.
You put people to work, you get them occupied, and when they work and they feel a sense of fulfillment, every other thing will begin to come together.
It's frustrating. It is, because these are the very basics that you want to know are provided for you. You want to know that there's at least a foundation that you can build on. There is no foundation for the Nigerian person to build on. You'll have this idea, this brilliant idea, this innovation that you want to put out there. The system is not even set up to support you because the very basics are not there. And it's so frustrating.
It is. And we hope that it's attended to, but, I would, and also to see how things unfold with Arik and everyone else. On the tech side of things, TechPoint, which covers technology in Nigeria as far as news and what's happening in the tech space, they released a report for the Q1 2020 period that showed that startups in Nigeria raised about $55.3 million, and out of those, that amount, it was higher than what they raised in 2018 and 2019. But what was interesting is that about 99% of the funds came from foreign investors. Only 1% came from the locals. About 18 investors participated. 82% of the funding went to fintechs in Nigeria, which is an encouraging area. But when you think about, our local investors and, whether or not they can support the tech ecosystem, this actually is a narrative that, extends to how much Nigeria needs foreign investment coming in. And
they should. They should be looking anywhere in tech.
We'll take a break. We'll take a quick break, but still hold on. We still have some 5 minutes with you. It's still the morning show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us is Rotu Sodiri, who has been taking on a number of business stories. And before we went on break, you were talking about the report by TechPoint. Yes.
So TechPoint, they released a Q1 2020 report showing that startup funding in Nigeria they brought in about $55.3 million, about 20 billion naira in funding. So 82% of that went towards fintechs. About 18 investors participated. But the key point that jumped out at me was, of course, the fact that they said 99% of the funding came from overseas. And, if you extend that to what Nigeria's economy needs, and Dr. Abati has talked about it several times, foreign indirect investment has to come into this country. Yeah. We need investment-led growth in order for Nigeria to push ahead. So, but then, the other side of this is how, we've got a lot of billionaires here, and it would help if we got more support, the tech community got more support from local investors.
Yeah. Well, this tech startup, community, it's an emerging community in Nigeria. And, many Nigerians became aware of it when there was a high-profile visit to Nigeria by the founder of Facebook,
Zuckerberg, yes.
Mark Zuckerberg, and he had this connection with many Nigerians in the tech startup community, with some of them even collaborating with Facebook. But the point is that, so if you say many Nigerians are not investing in it, maybe perhaps it's not an area that they've discovered yet. But if you look at some of the reports on opportunities that are still available in terms of investment, where, the risks and the uncertainties may not be as serious as in other sectors. The tech startup, ecosystem is one that has been identified by some analysts, not just fintech, but also agri-tech, which is also a growing area in Nigeria. Right. So I guess with time, with reduction in uncertainties and risks, many Nigerian billionaires that you are querying may then be interested in it. But again, the foreign investors you are talking about, are they not necessarily just foreign portfolio investors who can pull out?
Well, no.
So, at short notice. So when you celebrate the fact that a lot of foreign investors are coming in and they are locking down their capital in a particular part of our business ecosystem, right. You must also counter that with the fact that, these are this is capital that can just fly at short notice.
True. I mean, for foreign portfolio investors, we're talking about FPIs usually go into stocks and equities and fixed income. These are actually funding rounds, so Series A, B, C funding rounds. So the company comes and says, I have this idea, this is what I want to do, and they actually put money there and they see it through. It's almost similar to private equity investment in a way. Okay. But so the funds are there, provided that the company
now there's an exponential shift that really and truly tech is at the center of. And at the end of the day, if local investors do not start to look towards tech, then they're going to miss out, really. Right. That's the only way to put it. And I would say, we do need to see more local investors supporting our tech startups, and we encourage them to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
We'll go on a short break now, and when we are back, we'll be going through some COVID-19 updates with Aaron Akerejola. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Aaron Akerejola is in the studio with us now to give us more updates on COVID-19 today. Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Leila. Good morning, Doctor. And let's get into some of the numbers today. And 2.7 million cases of the virus has been confirmed globally, with the total death toll standing at 190,861 fatalities, according to the tally by Johns Hopkins University. The United States still leads the number of cases per country with 869,000 people infected with the virus. Western Europe followed suit with the likes of Spain, Italy, and Germany, and the United Kingdom all continuing to grow in the last 24 hours. But that particular figure, that particular graph you see on the screen there is from the WHO here in Africa, who have said that South Africa, Algeria, Cameroon, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Guinea are the most affected by COVID-19 in the African regions in terms of number of cases. And together, they've accounted for 66% of the reported cases in this region.
And in Africa, generally, 52 countries are affected.
Yeah.
But with, increased testing in Nigeria, we may find ourselves in a situation where by next week, we may overtake both Cote d'Ivoire and Guinea on that list. Because Cote d'Ivoire has just 952.
Yeah.
And Nigeria now is 981. Okay? So we're getting close to Ghana, which has about 1,014. Yeah. Then you have Cameroon also that has over 1,000, about 1,167. And you have South Africa and Algeria leading. South Africa with over 3,000 cases. Yeah. Algeria with close to 3,000 cases. But however, across Africa, we have had up to about 7,000 persons that have recovered. But the challenge, of course, is that the countries that are most impacted, we still need to do a lot more in terms of contact tracing, in terms of testing, and also in terms of case management. And it's good to see that, there was a meeting of African nations on this particular corona pandemic. They had a video conference, I think about 2 days ago. And Nigeria was represented there by Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazu and Dr. Sani Aliyu, who gave the Nigerian country situation report. And we've also seen the sharing of experiences among leaders of ECOWAS, also on this COVID-19. So it's good to see this development in terms of collaboration, exchange of information and ideas among various African countries, both at the continental level and also at the regional level. Yeah. Because the expectation is that Africa is going to be the next, major center of outbreak. Well, they said the same thing with Ebola. It didn't happen. No, and I think that this sharing of knowledge and information in Africa will probably help to check the spread of the virus on the continent.
Also post-COVID as well. Aaron, do we have any more stories?
Yes, and the race to actually find the cure or vaccine is still up and running. And it has been revealed that remdesivir, of course, a drug thought to be one of the best prospects for treating COVID-19, has failed to have any effect in the first full trial. The drug is in short supply globally because of the excitement it had generated. It is one of the drugs Donald Trump claimed was promising. In a gold standard, trial of 237 patients, some of whom received remdesivir, while others did not, the drug did not work. The trial was also stopped early because of the side effects. Of course, news of the failure was posted on WHO's clinical trial database.
Well, we cannot comment on the cure, but it's the scientists. It's for the scientists to continue to do
to look for a
work.
vaccine.
There have been all kinds of suggestions about chloroquine, about hydroxychloroquine, now remdesivir, which I think is one of the drugs used for HIV, right? Yeah, and all kinds of suggestions. But the scientists would have to help the world resolve the matter at the end. Yeah. And people should strictly follow WHO guidelines.
Absolutely. And it is frightening because at the end of the day, that's what the whole world is looking at right now, the race for a vaccine. It's like a ticking time bomb. And until the vaccine comes out, the world is not going to go back to the world as we know it or take on whatever the new normal that we're going to see is. So, yeah. The search continues, the race continues. Yesterday we spoke about Oxford University's having their first human trial. Yeah. So let's just stay hopeful. And the lead doctor, I believe, at Oxford University had said that she was 80%.
Professor Sarah Gilbert.
Yes.
That's her name.
She was 80% sure in some sort of success
Thank you very much.